So, all right, welcome to Powered by Backers. It is Justin. I am here with our guest. It is Ask an Expert. This is day 2. We are talking with Michael Hyatt. Michael Hyatt is, I guess, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, but I'd love you to fill me in, Michael, where I miss. Top 40 under 40 award recipient. You've built 2 highly successful tech firms valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. You worked, did you work with, or did you go to Rotman? You went to Rotman?
I did not go to Rotman.
Did not go, but you worked and you did a couple different programs there with Rotman. You started Blue Cat and sold that a number of years ago, and you work with a number of entrepreneurs and startups. You run your own family, essentially investment firm, right? A small family shop. Is that sort of what you do?
Yeah. So I just on the Rotman comment, I was one of the early investors and starters of the Creative Destruction Lab at Rotman. And,
okay.
So that's a big, very, very advanced and successful incubator, if that's the term to use, which is now done everywhere to building something great at U of T, and it's just been incredible, actually. But yeah, I have a family office. Now we spend our time investing in private equity and venture capital and real estate and everything that you're talking about.
Cool. So we're here, though this is Powered by Backers. We work with a lot of entrepreneurs, startups, small businesses. There's probably a few hundred that are going to watch this episode here today. I think we talked a little bit about a couple things that maybe we could touch on. I think the things that you mentioned, obviously I've heard predictions of 30-40% unemployment, right? So you talked about the job loss, the significant job loss very quickly, whereas in 2008, I was actually, I worked with AGF at the time. So, sort of in the investment management space, and you talk to advisors, and it was sort of like, yeah, there was a rundown on the exchange, where you saw 20% losses in a couple of days, but the actual overall job loss took a lot longer, and the housing, sort of the mortgages took a little longer for people to start losing houses and losing jobs, and the whole economy. I believe I saw a stat, it was like almost a year, almost 350 days or so was like the whole sort of the from start to finish. Whereas with this, they think, it could be 18 months, right? But that doesn't mean that we're not going to see, 30-40%, job loss or unemployment, very quickly, and then start to see that recovery over 18 months or longer, right? Maybe a few years. So I would ask you a question. You mentioned that that you had been, that you've been through the .com sort of bubble, as well as the the 08 housing bubble. What would you say is the sort of the expectation from you said there's no set date when we're going to get back to normal, but what is sort of the expectation of how long will it take potentially to get back to a normal? Or what I've heard, and what maybe other people are thinking, is that we will never get back to what was normal, and there will be a new normal. What are your thoughts on sort of how this plays out long term or medium term?
So after 2001, before 2001, if you go to New York City, you could just go into any building and go up in any building, no ID check, no security, none.
Right.
After the Twin Towers fell, after the attack on New York City, just about every city in the US and Canada locked down every building. You can't go up, in a lot of the towers, even in Toronto, without a check and get an invitation.
Right.
So, and what happened was after 9/11, there was a security, periphery put on everything, including the airlines, at a much, much higher degree. What's going to happen, I think, out of this crisis is that you're going to have a similar thing happen, where you're going to get such a big change in how are you going to trust somebody sitting next to you doesn't have, for example, the coronavirus, or doesn't have something like that. So the short answer to when does everything come back to what you think is normal, let me ask you a question, and it's a rhetorical one. When's the vaccine coming out? Because
Right.
okay, let's say we bend this curve, and let's say we get everything right down and stores open back up. When are you going to go to a Raptors game with all those people if you know there's no vaccine?
Right.
You're going to go. You're a guy. You go. You're look. With respect, your wife's not going to let you go and come home to the kids.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. You're not going to do it as a father. I'm not going to do it as a father. I'm not doing it. Then do I
Yeah.
want to go to a Raptors game? Hell yeah. Do I love a Raptors game? Hell yeah. Do I want to go to Leafs game? Hell yeah. But can I go? No. I mean, and not only can I not go, I can't go to a lot of things. So the new normal is going to exist on, you can probably do some things, but not everything for a long time. Listen, you know, the average vaccine takes a decade to make, a decade. The fact that we could come out with a vaccine in 12 to 18 months would be incredible. By the way, where's the vaccine for the first SARS outbreak? There isn't one. So, right. I mean, it's very, very hard to make a vaccine with that kind of efficacy and that it works and it's internationally understood and used and all the rest of it. I mean, a lot of people are raising their hands and saying they have this or that, and people are coming together. And, you know, Bill Gates is doing an amazing thing by pushing out and trying to put billions into creating vaccines, and that's probably the right answer. But the short answer is that we've gone through the wormhole and we're not coming back to the same place. And the reason is the new world we're walking into has a lot more to do with, you know, not being in big crowds for a very long time. And it could be 1 or 2 years of that. So, and why is that? Because, well, there's no vaccine and COVID is actually a very nasty thing. And yeah. It might be nasty for you, but it would certainly hurt your parents, and it could hurt in infants, and yeah, and it's unknown. So look, at the end of the day, business is going to change dramatically. And it's already changed dramatically. And if we were to open up today, let's say today is 60 days from now, which is a reasonable amount of time from today to open up Toronto. Like I always think to myself, I'm living in Toronto, when does the city of Toronto go back to work? That's a reasonable time to think the things have come back, because that's a good standard. Right. I think 60 days in my head would be minimum, and maybe it's 120. I have no clue when the city's going to open back up, but when it does, you know, I assure you, like every other business in the city, people aren't just going to flood to it. It's going to take time. There's going to be a slow climb back. And why do I know that? I know that because I look at China and I look at the stats and I look at the documents. China's opened back up. But if you look at their consumption, their electricity spend, everything of their consumption, it's still negative in just about every vertical. You know, even strange things like buying noodles is only back to like 80 to 90%. Like staple foods aren't really back. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of things that I think travel still rates at 0 over there as in vacationing or anything. But yeah. I mean, you can actually predict from, if you look at Goldman Sachs' newest research paper, which I'm talking about now, you look at all their stats and all their graphs, it shows you every single industry and which ones have started to come back, and nothing has really come back. And they've so-called beaten this virus that started in one of their cities. And, you know, predictably for Canada and every other nation, you know, if you start back up the economy, it's going to take some time. So if you're out there with a business and you believe you're hanging on for everything to be exactly like it was, say, you know, February 1st, I don't think that's happening for a very long time. I think you have to rethink your business. And that's why I'm saying you have to have a new business model. You have to pivot, no matter who you are. You know, maybe you have a restaurant and maybe you have to do a lot of deliveries, because you know, it's going to, I find it hard to believe that in 90 days, someone's going to go to a packed restaurant. Maybe they will, but it's going to be, you know, maybe I'd go to a restaurant that was sparsely packed and it was, but I don't know how I feel about that, because again, I come back to the fact that there's no vaccine. Yeah. You're not sure who has it. I mean, I use the very simple analogy. No one's going to shake anyone's hand for a very long time. Right. Maybe that's a good thing for the flu. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we should take a page from the Japanese, and maybe we should do a little more bow. Just a little bow. a little bow, you know, and I'm in for it. And that's a hell of a lot more sanitary. And listen, I don't think this is the last pandemic we'll see in our lifetimes. And I don't think that we're not going to see other things coming around. I mean, we did have a warm-up act, right? We had the first SARS. We did have small things like Zika, which seem small now. Yeah. And I think Ebola. Yeah, but Ebola didn't come over here. Not so much here, but yeah. No, and Ebola is starkly different. I mean, not until you're like lying in bed extremely ill and on your way to death do you actually become viral with that, in my understanding. Right. This is very difficult because you can show no symptoms and you're viral. Yeah, you're asymptomatic, yeah. Yeah, that's the problem with this. And I'm not a doctor. I do have a degree in biochemistry, but my understanding is that You know, it is, this was predictable in the sense that we should have been a little more ready. So what's going to happen here is all the governments are going to get ultra paranoid about getting ready. So I find it in a year from now, it would be very funny to me that every location in the world doesn't have a lot of ventilators, a lot of masks, a lot of face guards, just more than we ever need. And then maybe the next pandemic requires something else. But, you know, I can assure you that the Department of Homeland Security was made out of 9/11. There's going to be a department of, I hope we create a department of pandemic.
Right.
Or whatever it is, because, and I hope the G20 nations get together and agree on that, you know, and maybe the WHO runs that or whatever happens there, but something needs to happen that brings us together about these sort of things, because this is going to be a new archetype in the way we have to do business and live, right? I mean, we can't stay home for the next 10 years. We're going to have to go out and have a life and be people.
We're social beings, right? It's, I mean, that's
Sure.
one of the hardest things, I think. And just, I want to recap just because we had a bit of a cutout in the video and I kind of restarted it. So everyone that's watching, I'll do sort of a quick intro. I'm here with Michael Hyatt. Michael is a self-made millionaire. I'm just kind of reading a quick bio here. Top 40 under 40. Sort of reading, was part of the Next Gen Dragon's Den a few years ago. How long ago was that, did you say?
I don't know. I think it was 4 years ago or
4 years ago? Okay.
So time back.
Yeah, so you're founder, Blue Cat. You've built two, what's the other one? Highly successful tech firms, Blue Cat, both worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What's the other firm?
It was Diadem. It was an engineering software company. We sold both companies, and I run a family office now. So
okay, cool. Yeah, because we kind of just, I didn't want to interrupt our good talk there, but we kind of died off of the Facebook Live. For some reason, they kicked us out. So I re-upped it while we were mid-conversation. You were asking me, what was I thinking about? I was trying to reset everything up while you were giving us some golden nuggets there. So we were sort of talking about your thoughts on what is happening out there, you know, what people need to do to prepare for this, or not prepare for this, but to adapt to sort of a new norm. The one piece of thing that I think is great advice is that the strategy, the plan, the whatever you had on sort of January 1st, you know, to kind of, and I've said this actually in another piece that I was talking about, completely not scrap it necessarily, but, you know, take it and completely redo it or relook at it, or you know, reassess everything that you're doing, because everything that maybe the assumptions that were made then are likely, if I'm paraphrasing you, are likely not true today, or they've completely changed. Right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Look. First off, if you're running a business today and you're watching this, you've got to get your peacetime hat off and put your wartime hat on.
Right.
You got to understand, for the past 10 years, if I founded a company the past 10 years, certainly past 5 years or whatever, there's lots of liquidity. Everybody had a fund. Everybody had a way to get debt, get some money, get together with 4 real smart people in Waterloo. They start coding something. We get together. We do a seed round, pre-seed round. We do this. We get money. You could always kind of get it.
Yeah.
As long as you're a bunch of smart folks, you had a good market, you're going to be valued at $4 or $8 million, and you're going to get your thing going on, right? That's not happening right now. We've gone from cash is trash to everybody has it, to cash is king, everybody's conserving it.
Right.
And we just went like that in a matter of days.
Yeah, exactly.
And because the economy's been stopped. So you're going to have to rethink everything about your business. And by the way, you know, very specifically, you know, this is where the great CEOs and the great founders are born, in this time of despair, this time of difficulty. This is leadership. This is the hard stuff. I mean, the past 10 years has been like a picnic compared to now, because you could get money, you could find people, you maybe have problems hiring, or maybe not getting as much money or the valuation you want. But now when there's, you know, it's very hard to raise money when you can't meet somebody to take money from. Right? So if you're not a known entity, that's a very hard thing to do, right? So you're going to have to navigate very differently with your business right now, and really do a lot more hand-to-hand combat and pivot your business. So if you told me you had to pivot virtually for everything, I would say, yeah, that sounds right as a start.
Right. It's sort of, yeah, that sort of mother, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Sure.
You know, out of difficult times, those who are, you know, strong will step up. Those that are leaders will be able to thrive, and others will be sort of washed to the side.
Look, part about the concept of capitalism is the idea of creative destruction.
Yeah.
Right? is what's going to happen right now. A lot of businesses are going to go away because it's very Darwinian. Just because they cannot survive the cash flow, the hit, the question for their business. I mean, look, you're running five restaurants that are doing amazing, or whatever you're running. I mean, your restaurant just went to zero. If you're running massage parlor clinics or whatever it is, like, you know, anything that is to do with people coming in, hair salons, anything, you're on massive pause.
Pretty much brick and mortar, like in general, across all industries, like retail, services.
It's very hard to pivot a hair salon because you do hair. So unless you're sending people hair dye at home or something, you really don't have many other options.
Or videos on how to cut your own hair.
Yeah, and I've seen that. That's kind of an Instagram funny thing, maybe a TikTok. Look, everybody has to rethink the model. I just want people to get out of this talk that there's not just going to be it's August 1st, everybody came back.
Right.
Don't expect that. Expect
it's not summer where we're just on vacation and we're all back Labor Day or whatever. It's going to be a longer.
Well, even when that happens, business doesn't pick up day one. I mean, if everything opened tomorrow, expect 50% to come back, and that's your good case scenario right now.
Right. I heard a stat that 10% of restaurants, and this could be very sort of a broad stat, but they expect 10% of restaurants that have closed for good. So we'll never reopen, and that might be low. Yeah.
I think that's low.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, just think of that. That's, you know, even 10%, if it's 20%, those are pretty significant numbers, you know, considering that's, you know, there's staff, there's, you know, obviously.
Well, I'll give you another stat. Beef and a lot of meats have gone up between 30 and 50% while restaurants are being closed. So when they open back up, they're going to have to pay 30 to 50% more for meat.
Right, so their costs are going to be higher. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things going on there. I mean, it's going to be brutal in the hotel industry, the restaurant industry, and a lot of other industries. Listen, I'm not sure if you caught this part in the beginning. To understand the math of what's going on, in 2008 and 9, in all 108 weeks, you had almost 10 million laid off. In the first 2 weeks of this crisis, you had 10 million laid off in the U.S.
Right.
So, I mean, you're talking about 40 million people working those industries that I described. I mean, it is a short-term, paused, self-created depression, not a recession. When you stop the economy from moving, you force the depression. We don't want to use that term, but that's what it kind of is.
Right.
And then we have to start up the economy. But the economy is going to get started, but then someone's going to say, well, wait a second, I know we bent the curve, but it's still, coronavirus is still somewhere here.
Right.
Wait a sec, these are the things I'm gonna do, these are the things I'm not gonna do. And I can tell you what you're not gonna do. You're not gonna go to crowded places.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's flip it. I have a really probably different question, and I'll preface it so you can sort of think about it while I'm asking it.
Sure.
So you talked about cash is king, you know, and we're, you know, our platform has a whole sort of blockchain based component to it, not so much the coin, but blockchain, so more on the back end operating system through like security tokens. But my question to you more on the actual sort of crypto side, specifically to Bitcoin and to Facebook's Libra, or that concept of a digital currency. What, you know, and I'll, before you answer that, I just want to know, you know, what are your thoughts on where Bitcoin went or was? And then I guess just sort of, and I don't really want to talk specifically to Bitcoin, and I don't want to talk about crypto. I just want to talk about the concept of somewhat of a universal currency, because in my opinion, and I you know, I haven't shared this with many, but I mean, I've seen it be talked about out there. A lot of currencies are going to be extremely devalued. There's going to be governments that are significantly undercapitalized, significant debt loads. Their currency, there's going to be huge inflationary risk with currencies. Do you see that playing into sort of a digital currency, whether it's Bitcoin or crypto or another idea, or where do you see all that coming out of? I know Libra with Facebook, you know, kind of is put on hold a little bit. You know, there's been a lot of regulatory backlash, you know, a month ago, but where do you see maybe that coming in? And I've been asking this, I've been taking a long time to ask the question because I didn't want to just throw it at you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the general concept of digital currency and a sort of global currency, and where your thoughts are on that, and maybe how businesses can play into that.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, well, but I'm trying to.
You got like 9 questions.
I'm giving you time to think about your thought process on digital currency.
Listen, I'm an owner of Bitcoin for a long time,
right.
And I got to tell you, I'm not that bullish on it. There's a number of reasons I'm not bullish on it. I think the experiment of cryptocurrency has been quite a wide failure. And, you know, if you go to CoinMarketCap and you go through the top 100 list, I've asked this question. I was in Toronto 2 years ago at a massive cryptocurrency, and I said the same thing to the audience. Show me something that's done something. Show me something that's replaced something. I mean, you know, like when Uber replaced the taxi, they broke the dispatch, they did something. When Facebook did this, they did this. When Google did this, they changed the price of search. You know, Google comes along, they completely changed the way we found things. I mean, there's nothing fundamentally, there's nothing fundamental about all these funny name coins. Let's say we leave Ethereum and like a general purpose coin like Ethereum or Bitcoin out and look at all the other coins right now. You can find some edge cases, you can find some whatever, but it's just really bad speculation. So first off, you know, my problem, I'm just going to give you my problem with Bitcoin in general, even though that I have a bunch of it, and I'm just sitting here and I'm actually trading on a greater fool basis, because I believe some people think wrongly that it's going to be worth like tons more. I guess it's going to be worth more because I think people are going to have a FOMO, not
speculative
anymore.
Yeah.
Look, to understand what backs Bitcoin, nothing backs Bitcoin.
Of course.
What backs the US dollar is the full faith of the US
economy.
Well, it's the US economy. And when you say, okay, there's 20 trillion of debt, but there's also 20 trillion of revenue, right?
They're at 108% undercapitalized.
Well, first off, the US is the reserve currency. You have a global currency called the US currency. And for all the mistakes the US make, for all the problems they have, everybody runs to the US currency still. And there is nothing to replace that. And there's a reason for that, because nothing has the ballast to replace it. And what I mean by that is there's no currency at all that can spend trillions to get itself out of a mess or fight a war or get into a healthcare problem and be okay with it, except the US currency. There is no alternative to the US currency right now viable as a reserve currency. I mean, the won's not going to do it. The euro kind of took itself out of the running after they cut people's bank accounts in Cyprus. Like there's not enough gold. There's not enough Canadian dollar. There's not enough Swiss francs.
Of course, not Canadian dollar.
No, but there's a reason for it, because people do trust Canadians, but there's not enough of it. There's a practical reasons. It's people's misunderstanding of economics which messes it up. And there's this idea that I can create a digital currency and it's supposed to have some kind of backing. Well, all currencies are fiat, which means that none are backed by gold. After 1971, they're not backed by gold, okay? Right. And that's fine, and that's been well accepted. Right now, you know, I find it funny that people are talking about, you know, we should, you know, watch debt and watch austerity and all that. You know, I'm a conservative guy, I'm a fiscal hawk, but I completely disagree with that right now. We are in an absolute crisis and emergency, and if the provincial and federal government right now were not pumping cash into this economy, you, me, all of us would be in tremendous amounts of trouble. Right. What I hope now, what my hope is, as someone who's done well, my hope is every single person who's laid off is getting that emergency funding. I mean, we badly need that. We have no time to worry about debt and deficits right now in this short time. We have no time to worry about all this other stuff. We have to get through this emergency, because until the economy can open back up, our revenue as an economy is functionally dropped in half or 2/3, right? I don't think there's any digital currency whatsoever that can replace the reserve currency, our currency. Listen, the problem you have with Bitcoin, as an aside, is it's run by 1,000 whales. There's like 1,000 people in the world that have too much of it and kind of swing the price and everything like that. It is not a well-distributed product. And by the way, the entire cryptocurrency space, to just put a nail in the coffin, is worth kind of 1 to 200 billion. That's like kind of a good-sized bond fund in New York. It doesn't matter. It is completely irrelevant. There is nothing, there's no size in cryptocurrency that matters. They're not even close to it. They couldn't do a damn thing to help the economy, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with the crypto side, and I agree with the unbacked. And I wasn't so much getting into the Bitcoin side or even sort of pushing the crypto space. My whole question was more along the lines of, because of the, and I agree with you on the, letting all, pulling all the stops and getting, the emergency relief to the communities, to the people that need it, those that are getting laid off, the, small businesses,
100%.
startups who are like 100%. And it's, on the government. That's, this is a time when, if any time has ever been, that, we have governments in place so that we can rely on them to sort of come in and step in, help out the little guy.
What's your question?
My question was more on the sense of I guess, the concept of a digital currency that isn't just, ruled or run by one nation, state, whatever, but is now more universal. That can then have, and it can, and in theory, you brought up the US dollar, right? But
that's not how it works. The US as if you look at US as a valuable corporation, if you can look at it that way, and you have the value of its land, its aircraft carriers, its army, its all this, its R&D, it's worth like hundreds of trillions, right? And it is so valuable, right? And that's why right now it's the only viable choice as a reserve currency. I mean, people can criticize, for all the mistakes the US makes, they finally eventually do the right things. And it is the, they are the super economy that's holding the ballast right now. You have China and you have some other countries, but really, truly, we don't have another choice. There won't be a digital currency that is kind of controlled and owned by everybody. That's not how things work. And every group currency, every collective currency in history has dissolved. And I would argue that the euro has been okay, not great, and it's got itself into tremendous amounts of trouble. So if you are Greece or Italy over the past, how many crises have we seen of these, Spain, Italy, Greece, over the past 5-10 years? Normally, if they had their own currency, they could inflate their way out of the problem. But since they're currency users and not issuers, they have no ability to control the currency. So it wasn't like, they could make their currency really cheap so everybody would take a vacation there, right? That's normally what they would do in a recession, but they did not have that choice. And I would argue that now that Italy almost has no way to ever get out from under its debt now, So
do you think having a fiat currency for each nation or state is a component of its sort of ability to maneuver in and out of situations or issues?
Yes, because if I told you, just pretend it wasn't around. If I told you, let's say we had the lira back in Italy or the drachma in Greece, and I said to you, look, they're having a terrible time with their economy, they're all this, they're defaulting, all this, but you could go to a beautiful resort in Greece for 7 days for $1,000, right? With your currency, you'd be like, hell yeah, I'm in, and they'd be like, bring your money.
I did it with Cuba in March break. We did $2,000, 4.5 stars, all 4 of us.
But that's because
all inclusive.
They're not pegged to the US dollar, and they have that's the point. The point is that countries that had control of their own currency had the ability to bring their economy back. I would say that, one of the reasons why you have to have this euro the way it is right now is if you basically did put all the economies back, the only powerhouse of Europe really, really right now is Germany, and their a Deutschmark would be like so strong it would put them into a recession, right? So the common currencies have never worked out in the history of humankind. Eventually they dissipate. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the euro. I mean, it's certainly a convenient currency, but again, I think this kind of current digital currency dream where everybody shares the same digital currency, I don't think it takes into account how economies actually work.
It's interesting. So I wasn't really thinking this direction, but I'll ask this question. So you brought up an interesting point that I read an article the other day talking about the fact that, the European Union has arguably been not gone the way that they would have liked. I won't say a failure or a success, but it hasn't necessarily gone the way they would have envisioned. And one of the things that's coming out of this whole sort of coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, whatever you want to call it, I like calling it the Kung Flu, which is kind of what I've heard it be called, which is kind of interesting. Is now you see people closing their borders. You see people being very much, especially in Europe, the US, Canada, there was almost, talk of militarizing the border. Is this almost, I've heard this is sort of the world, the globalization, instead of just the European, the EU, but the globalization project has failed. What would your thoughts on that be, or is that just bullshit? Pardon my French.
I don't think it's that. I think like there's just something very practical has occurred. I don't think people want to get on a cruise, get on a plane. Like I, for example, one of the best trips I've ever been on in my life was going to Japan. If you haven't been to Japan, my hope is that you get to Japan sometime in your life. It's a mind-blowing experience. It's such an incredible place. Right. And I just really want to go back to Tokyo because I had like the best time in Tokyo. I could go on a whole podcast of why I love Tokyo. But I can't go really back to Tokyo probably until there's a vaccine. Right. And so, the part of this conversation I'll just keep coming back to, until we can kind of tell people you're not going to get this or we're not going to have this, you're not going to venture out as much as you used to. You're not going to go on a cruise. You're not going to jump on many planes. You're not going to go to a big sporting event so the economy is going to kind of half open up when it opens up, right? And then, we just hope that we don't have another type of mutated version of this pandemic, right? But the world is going to change. Like, think about when's the next time you're going to go see a movie in a movie theater? Like, I love going to IMAX.
Probably never. I mean, what will they? Never. Like, you think? Do you think they'll still exist?
Yeah, I do. But I mean,
think Netflix won't completely, and Disney Plus and all the others that are going to come on afterwards will completely eliminate movie theaters? Like, I honestly think they were already eliminated.
Probably. I don't think it's going to go that far, but it's going to get there. I think VR. Now I got a new Oculus, the new Facebook Oculus Quest.
Okay.
Immediately, I see that as being the future in a much more advanced version. I never thought, like, I tried VR. Why did I try VR? I'm at home. I want to try something new. I want to have a new video game console.
Right.
I love it. But I never would have tried it if this didn't happen. Right. Zoom, you and I are on this. We're meeting right now because of this, right?
Yeah.
And how many of these do we do now? So, and I've never tried Instacart. Well, if I could ever get that to work, because it's like
it took 5 days for us to get our Instacart.
We gave up after 9. But I mean, the point is that trying Instacart, VR, Zooms.
Yeah.
Right. But we're at the end of the day, we're really social animals, and I think we're going to come back somewhat socially, and then we're going to have to just be careful. I mean, we're going to be very defensive of our children and and the elderly. And this is a very serious thing. So I think we're in this for the long run. I think the change is going to take a couple of years because you got to guarantee me that vaccine. And when I get that vaccine and everything's calmed down, I'm going to go on a flight and I'm going to hang out in Tokyo again because I love it. And I'd love to go to other places in the world. I'd love to go to Africa. I'd love to go, all parts of Asia. But I mean, I can't go until we can figure this out. And by the way, if you try to fly to China today, 100% of flights are going to Beijing. Then they quarantine you for 2 weeks, and it's very hard to go to China now.
Right.
So I think they're setting up a glimpse of how it's going to have to work. And what are we going to do as Canadians when you come to our country? There's no vaccine. Like, what are we prepared to do and what not to do? Are we prepared to say you can come to our country, but you got to be in quarantine, like other countries are doing? Is that going to become something new? I don't know. And, that goes for all Americans coming here. Do we quarantine them? I don't know. It sounds very, very harsh, but it depends where this thing comes out at, because I think the only thing everybody can agree on right now in the situation we're in is that no one can stand for a shutdown economy.
Right.
No one can stand for what's happening right now. And we can't do this for more than a short period of time.
Right.
And I can assure you that if the US and Canada and the other governments weren't pumping in tremendous amounts of cash, we'd have tremendous amounts of social unrest. Right. So if the government came out tomorrow and wanted to put more money into it and help more entrepreneurs and more this and more that, and I'd be all for it, And listen, I'm a bit of a fiscal hawk. I don't like deficits either, but this is not a normal situation.
No, definitely not. And just for the record, I've never been to Japan, but I did live in Korea. Not that they're identical, but there are some similarities. I lived over there for a year. I love that sort of part of the world for sure.
Yeah.
So I would definitely like to get to Japan at some point. I'm sure I've heard it's really nice.
But just my point is, I don't think anybody's. I mean, those are some of the most profitable routes for like an Air Canada and all these other airlines. Right. I mean, right now, Delta and some of the airlines are saying we're not going to get back up to our peak until like 2022, 2023.
Right.
Well, it's going to be a while. The fact that Warren Buffett just sold his stock after buying them months ago was astounding to me, right? I
He
mean,
sold his Delta stock?
I think he sold. I think he did. Yeah. I mean, check that fact, but I think he did after just buying it. And I think and you never know what the ins and outs of his trades are, but I mean, it's going to be a while before the airline business comes back, right? I'm actually, if you ask one airline, I have been buying, and I just, it's just for me. I'm not telling people to buy it, but I have been Air Canada stock because I believe in the company and I believe in their comeback, but and their value. But I think this is going to be a long road home for a lot of companies.
Yeah, you want a stat on the Air Canada? I think it's the top 5 most profitable routes is the Toronto to Vancouver Air Canada.
Yeah.
So
I wouldn't be surprised Toronto at all as well, but okay.
Toronto to Vancouver is like worldwide. All airlines worldwide, the Air Canada Toronto to Vancouver is top 5 most profitable. Anyways, this stat that my wife's from Vancouver, so we do it a lot. So we just, anyways. So I wanted to kind of go back to the direction we're talking to, an audience of entrepreneurs. And I really appreciate you again, Michael, for coming on. We did have some technical difficulties. We did have to transition from one sort of distribution on the fly to Zoom. I literally signed up for Zoom, and we started going live, right before we went live. So I bought my Zoom account and we went live. So thanks to Zoom, we're live here. I guess I want to sort of bring it back full circle. So we talked sort of broader, global, some of the, potential things that, might impact us or why we should do this, that, or the other. Let's take it back maybe to on a micro level. You're an entrepreneur. You've been an entrepreneur. You've worked with entrepreneurs. You've worked with startups, smaller ventures, larger businesses. You're a leader, I would assume. You've led, larger teams. What would you recommend let's look on the micro level, right? So let's look at what would you recommend an entrepreneur or a business leader do today, tomorrow, aside from putting on his pants every day or her pants, what would be sort of the small things that you would sort of recommend them to do to kind of, take it, I don't want to take words out of my mouth, but sort of take it day by day, or like, what would you sort of recommend that they do in your opinion, just from a very micro level? Look,
some people watching this right now could be in a business where it's booming. I mean, I think
there are a couple I've heard of actually.
Yeah, but I think 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 are having a challenge. So this is what I would do if I were you. I would get my peacetime hat off and I put my wartime hat on.
As you said,
I would start really thinking about modeling out my revenues very, very differently. New revenues this quarter that we're in right now, just so you understand, in the United States, in this quarter that we're in, is going to print a negative 30% plus GDP. That GDP, that gross domestic product of negative 30 for the US, which will approximate to Canada this quarter, is so negative and so deep, it's 3 times that of all of US history. So just to understand, it is if you were to tell me that you're going to cut your new sales this quarter by 50 or 75%, and then next quarter by 50, and then the next quarter by 50, then the next quarter by 25, relook at your math, thinking that people aren't going to pay you as fast, people are going to default more, you're going to have a higher churn rate, all those things are modeled in, and then you show me your bottom line, whether you're profitable or you have cash. That's what's key. If I was an entrepreneur today, I'd be saying, how do I get 12 months out from today? How do I get my business 12 months? How do I survive this without raising money? So if you have money in the bank and you have revenue and you're mildly profitable, marginally, you have to really, really take that very, very seriously. Cash is king. Maybe the cavalry isn't coming. Maybe you're not going to be rescued. Maybe you can't get debt. If you do have a debt line, think about drawing the whole debt line down for security, and then think about some way to make it so to March 31st. If you do a model and you cut your sales dramatically, you increase your defaults, you increase your churn rates, and you can't get to March 31st, then you have to start taking evasive action. That's what I would do. I'd start modeling my business very differently. Now, some of you might be saying, Michael, I deliver food, or I deliver this, or I'm in shipping logistics and I'm booming, then this is not for you, but just think it through carefully. But for everybody else, this is for you. And even some of those industries, like you said, they're suppliers, they're the people that they're delivering to, they're gonna have extended, they're not gonna be paid, right? How are you assured? You think that, once you say it's 30 days payment, maybe you're gonna get paid. Maybe you're not. How do you know?
Yeah.
So you have to double check your credit rating on everybody.
Yeah.
Because if your clients are suffering, you're going to suffer.
Yeah, exactly. And even though your business is in high demand, because they're suffering, their ability to use your service or pay for your service can be sort of diminished. So yeah, no, that's, and so I like the 12-month sort of, March 31st. So we're on, April 8th. So roughly 12-month outlook, right? On how you can maintain some semblance of a business for the next 12 months, keeping at least a skeleton staff, if that's what it is, or, some sort of maybe shifting. You mentioned like a whole new business paradigm shift to maybe a different business model, different business idea, strategy, product, service, and reassessing everything that you assumed. In the very, very, very short term, what can people do to, where should they look for their keys, or should they maybe sort of just come within and look within for their, their own thought processes?
So if you have investors, you need to over communicate with them right now.
Communication.
You should be having a weekly email to your investors. You should be having at least one call with your board or a subcommittee, your board a week. You should be taking your closest investors and advisors and having a Zoom with them on a weekly basis. You should be outlining your top 3 problems and how you're going to work through it. You should be calling people in that you trust and getting on a consistent basis to over communicate and figuring out how to get out of this. I guess if you don't have investors, you don't have advisors, then you're going to have to find some advisors.
Right.
But you need to be over communicating right now. You need to be candid. You need to be honest. If you have employees, honesty is the best policy. Have a stand up, say, this is a very hard time. We are going to get through this hard time, but this is the hard time we're in. And this is what we're going to do as a team together to get through it. And it may be everybody takes a pay cut. It may be, I had a guy call me yesterday whose business went to zero. So we got the 75% from the government, and the next 25% he gave them in stock. Right. So they're in a way getting their 100% salary.
Creative way of getting them.
Yeah, you know what? And I applaud him for that, right? He's trying to make it whole for them as best he can. But what can he do? His business went to zero. So it's not like he's like is being a bad guy. It's like kind of hard when you can't do your job. So everybody has to make do with what they got and have to be very creative around what's going on right now. But be very candid with your staff. Ask them for help, lean in, explain the situation, don't hide from it. And if you say you're having a hard time, well, so is everybody else. So there's no, stop playing poker, Right. And if you have some peers that you can talk to saying, hey, get a therapy group going on Zoom, maybe 2-3 of you can get together.
Insight. And that's kind of what we're doing with this, the whole idea of this Ask an Expert and the next 21 days with our audience and the people watching is to sort of give them insights and tips, tricks, ideas from people like yourself who have been in the trenches, like you said, wartime hat, in both you mentioned the bubble, the housing bubble, as well as the .com bubble, and any other you've kind of gone through some things. So that's definitely it. And I 1,000,000,000% agree with you. The over communication. I mean, even in good times, communication is key. But in a time like this, open dialogue and communication is the way to go, because everyone then feels like they have a say. They're all on the same page. They can all communicate with each other and all feel like at least they know what's going on, because one of the worst things, especially in a time like this, is the uncertainty, right? And the not knowing maybe where the business is going, where you stand in the business, especially when you're talking about staff or employees. I mean, we have this issue, right? We actually have implemented, I watched a talk with some general from the Afghan war, sort of Afghanistan. And he was talking about how they would do this daily meetup. And we've actually started doing it. We do a live call with all the people in our sort of sphere every morning at 9 a.m. just to kind of say, hey, all right, so we're still here. We're still good. This is where we're going. So this is what happened. And and so we've started that.
Yeah, and here's a tip for you. Throw some humor in. Have some fun.
Yeah.
Tell some jokes.
Yeah.
Show your kid running around screaming. Whatever. Show your dog.
Do you want to see that in my?
Yeah. I have
if
one.
I shift it over here, there's two
That's okay. That's
6-year-old
okay.
going crazy out the window.
But that's okay. I mean, and that's human, and it's fun, and everybody should smile. And sometimes bringing my Chihuahua on screen is fun. And
Right.
you know, we're people, right? Like everybody's trying to get by this tough time and have some fun and communicate and do a stand up, and all this stuff's really important. Over communicate. It's a really good idea. I think you're right.
Perfect. Awesome. I think we're getting a bit of feedback there, but Michael, do you have any final things that you want to? I don't want to take all of your time. We could sit here and talk probably all day about a lot of things.
No, listen, I'll end up by saying this. Like, if everybody listening, this will pass. We'll get through this.
Right.
The world we're coming out at is going to be different. It's going to be a little longer than harder than you like. Things will come back, but differently and a little slower, and it won't come back as fast as it stopped. But eventually, you know, we'll find a way through this. This will pass. We'll find a vaccine eventually, and as the Queen said, we'll all be together again, and we'll meet again, and that's very, very true. And but don't lose hope. Stay positive. I do really think the governments are doing the right thing. As all the mistakes the governments make and all the problems that the governments have, they're doing the best they can to get as much liquidity to the market as can at a terribly difficult time. And there's no playbook for this. There is no such thing. And everybody's rowing really hard in the boat. And stay positive and know this will pass. But if you're running a business, hope is not a strategy. Indecision is not a strategy. Inaction is not a strategy. A strategy is, you know, taking full advantage of this time to really model out the difficult time you're in and get through it. Awesome. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate you taking some time today. Yeah, if is there any way, what are you up to these days? What are you working on? I'm investing in companies. That's what I do. Are you? So we should connect, and we definitely have some businesses coming through the pipeline. So sure. I'd love you to sort of follow along what we're doing. So again, appreciate you coming on, taking the time, and sort of, again, I appreciate you going through the the technology difficulties there earlier. So thank you very much. I'm going to end the live here. Everyone, thanks. This has been day 2 of the Ask an Expert on Powered by Backers. Day 3 is tomorrow. And let me just quickly see who we have on day 3. Day 3 is tomorrow, and we have Svetlana Ratnikov, right, from the International Women's Business Association. So she will be on tomorrow talking about a number of different things. So look forward to seeing her. Michael, I'm going to end the live. Thank you very much for being on here. We'll talk again soon. All right. Take care. Bye. Cheers, thanks.